So I will discuss the concept of Homo sacer in greater detail because it is one of the most interesting and I think well cited philosophical concepts of our time. Giorgio Agamben uh, really does travel quite well. Agamben's work has been used to discuss many contexts of sovereign power and sovereign violence. So in Giorgio Agamben's writings, Homo sacer, which is Latin for sacred man or accursed man, refers to a figure in Roman law who can be killed with impunity, but not sacrificed in a religious ritual. Agamben uses this concept to analyze the relationship between sovereign power and what the author terms bare life, or Zoe, in modern societies. Essentially, Homo sacer embodies the idea of a life that is excluded from the law and political community, yet still subject to the sovereign's power, particularly in situations of state-sanctioned violence or exclusion. So we've discussed the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls report and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report throughout the class. And I've specifically made reference to the murder of Cindy Gladue in Shireen Razak's writings about disposability. And in Razak's article about disposability and the murder of Cindy Gladue, the author cites Giorgio Agamben and looks at Agamben's use of this term, the sovereign power. So Agamben argues that sovereign power, in its ability to create and enforce law, also has the capacity to define and exclude certain lives, rendering them as Homo sacer. The concept of Homo sacer is closely tied to Agamben's notion of a state of exception, where the sovereign suspends normal legal and political order to deal with a perceived crisis, often resulting in the marginalization and dehumanization of specific groups. So the example that Agamben gives as an Italian philosopher who wrote in a certain time period or whose ideas make reference to a certain time period is the Holocaust and the creation of concentration camps. But Razak uses Agamben's ideas to discuss the murder of Cindy Gladue and the suspension of the rule of law in cases of extreme violence and murder of Indigenous women and girls. And again, Bradley Barton was never referred to as a white man or a settler in the court of law in the many trials and appeals of Bradley Barton. Cindy Gladue was referred to as a native prostitute, a native over 50 times in a Canadian court of law. So this use of language is really about the suspension of belief in innocence and the suspension of the rule of law. That Cindy Gladue was put on trial posthumously after being murdered. And this is an example of the suspension of the rule of law and the use of state power to kill with impunity. Agamben uses Homo sacer to analyze contemporary situations of exclusion and violence, such as refugee camps, prisons, and other spaces where individuals are relegated to a state of bare life, to the arbitrary power of the state. So Agamben suggests that inmates of concentration camps, particularly those who were reduced to a state of extreme dehumanization, can be seen as modern-day Homo sacer. So the dehumanization of Gladue was apparent throughout the entire trial and through the use of disparaging languages even after she had been killed. And so the scripting of Cindy Gladue as a sex worker after her death is used to exonerate Barton of his crimes, making it impossible to actually kill someone who is perpetually thought of as a criminal. And this kind of post-humanist trial of those who are put on trial after they are killed by others is similar in cases of anti-Black racism, where people who are killed are accused of crimes after they've died, meaning that you could always commit crimes against certain people who are accused of crimes because of their identity, not because of action. So Agamben's concept is still useful today in the liberal arts and humanities and in considering hate crimes and hate motivated murder, and the capacity for the state to exonerate perpetrators of crime when they kill colonized peoples or when they kill persecuted minorities. Thank you.